The sterile scent of the hospital corridor always felt a little sharp to Eleanor, but today it was overlaid with the sweet, nervous perfume she dabbed behind her ears that morning. Hospital regulations aside, a mother had certain standards, even when confined to a room. Her room, cheerful enough with a vase of bright, slightly wilting gladioli from Thomas, felt less like a sick room and more like a waiting station today, a station for a most important arrival. Eleanor, a retired librarian who had spent her life quietly surrounded by stories both real and imagined, had settled into a peaceful rhythm since leaving her long career. After her husband passed away 5 years ago, the big family home felt too large, too quiet. She had downsized to a comfortable little cottage in Oakhaven, a town she loved for its gentle pace and friendly faces. Her son Thomas, her only child, and the absolute light of her life, still lived and worked in the bustling city 2 hours away. Their relationship was one of deep affection and mutual respect. Thomas was a kind, thoughtful man, burdened sometimes by the weight of his responsibilities as a lawyer, but always finding time for his mother. They spoke on the phone almost every day, sharing the small details that knitted their lives together across the miles. Thomas had, for the past year, spoken increasingly often of Clara, the young woman who had captured his heart, who shared his values, who made him genuinely happy. Eleanor had only seen photographs, smiling, vibrant pictures of a woman with kind eyes and a cascade of light brown hair. She looked lovely, intelligent, capable, but photos, Eleanor knew from years spent observing human nature in the quiet corners of the library, were curated moments. They didn't capture the quiet heart, the true spirit of a person, the way they reacted when nobody important was watching. Thomas had confessed recently, his voice full of tenderness, that he planned to ask Clara to marry him soon. This news had filled Eleanor's heart with a quiet joy. All a mother truly wants is for her child to find lasting happiness with a good person. Meeting Clara, truly meeting her, felt like the final piece falling into place. A chance to see if the wonderful woman in the photographs was the wonderful woman who would share her son's life. But life, as it often does, had thrown a small curveball. A stubborn bout of pneumonia had landed Eleanor in the local community hospital. Nothing serious, the doctors assured her, just a necessary pause to let her lungs recover properly. Thomas had been beside himself with worry, driving down immediately. He'd insisted she stay until the doctor gave a definitive all clear, and truthfully, Eleanor wasn't in a rush to leave the quiet routine and the gentle care of the nurses, especially Mrs. Gable, the kindest and most patient of them all. The hospital, while sterile, felt safe and allowed her time to simply be, to read, and to think. Today, however, routine was replaced by fluttering anticipation. Thomas was meant to arrive mid-morning, bringing Clara after a work commitment downtown. He'd called earlier, his voice tight with frustration, explaining he was running late due to an unexpected issue with a case. "Clara will come on ahead, Mother," he'd promised. "She's looking forward to meeting you. The driver will drop her at the main entrance. I've given her your room number, but maybe it would be nicer to meet in the common room. It's brighter." Eleanor understood. Thomas carried the weight of his responsibilities with earnest dedication, a trait she both admired and worried over. He worked too hard, worried too much. She told him not to rush, that she'd be perfectly fine waiting, and she would be. But the waiting felt longer now, tinged with the unfamiliar anxiety of a mother hoping her son's chosen partner would fit, truly fit, into the quiet corners of their lives. Would she be kind? Would she be genuine? Would she see beyond the simple life Eleanor now lived? She decided not to wait in her room. The common room on her floor was brighter, with large windows overlooking a small, brave garden clinging to the hospital grounds. It was often populated by patients in various stages of recovery, visitors, and the occasional busy nurse. It felt less formal than a bedside meeting. Eleanor dressed carefully in her most comfortable, yet still presentable soft cotton trousers and a pale blue cardigan. Her hair, usually styled with librarian-like precision, was simply tied back in a low bun. She looked, she knew, less like the Eleanor who hosted quiet tea parties and more like, well, like any woman recuperating in a hospital, perhaps a little tired around the eyes, a little softer around the edges than the elegant woman in the photographs Thomas cherished. Taking a seat by the window, She watched a robin hop on the damp grass outside. The air felt fresh, carrying the faint, earthy smell of spring. Across the room, old Mr. Henderson dozed in his armchair, a newspaper tented across his chest. Near the door, a young woman with worried eyes sat twisting a handkerchief, and in the far corner, nestled in a worn armchair, was Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable, sweet soul, struggled with her eyesight and sometimes her memory. She was a long-term patient, often confused but always radiating a gentle warmth. Today she was trying to read a large print book, holding it much too close to her face and squinting with frustration. Eleanor felt a familiar tug of compassion. Gently she rose and walked over. Years of reading aloud to children in the library, to her husband in the evenings, had given her a clear, steady voice. "Good morning, Mrs. Gable," Eleanor said softly, pulling up a chair beside her. "Having a bit of trouble with your reading today?" Mrs. Gable looked up, her kind face crinkling in a smile. "Oh, Eleanor, dear. Yes, these letters keep dancing away from me. They simply won't stay still." Eleanor sat beside her. "Would you like me to read to you for a while? I have a clear voice, you know. Comes from years of reading stories aloud. I find it helps the letters behave." "Oh, that would be lovely, dear. Truly lovely." Mrs. Gable sighed with relief, pushing the book towards her. It was a well-worn collection of comforting poems, simple verses about nature and quiet moments. Eleanor began to read, her voice a steady, soothing rhythm in the quiet room. She was engrossed in a passage about a garden in bloom, a scene of gentle beauty, when the doors to the common room swung open. Eleanor looked up, her heart giving a little leap. A young woman stood hesitantly in the doorway, scanning the room. It was Clara. She looked exactly like her photos, perhaps a little more dressed up than Eleanor might have expected for a hospital visit, but lovely and poised. Yet somehow in person she seemed more real, more uncertain, standing on the threshold of this unfamiliar place, searching. She wore an elegant coat over a smart dress and carried a small, stylish bag. Her eyes, Eleanor noticed, held a mixture of shyness and expectation as she scanned the faces. Clara's gaze swept the room, landing on Eleanor and Mrs. Gable in their quiet corner. Eleanor, in her plain clothes, her hair simply tied back, absorbed in reading to an elderly patient, clearly didn't resemble the image Clara must have built of Thomas's mother, the quietly distinguished former librarian. She saw someone who looked like, well, like a kind volunteer, or perhaps a dedicated hospital aide spending a quiet moment with a patient. Her appearance, stripped of the usual context of her home or social life, blended into the everyday reality of the hospital. An unexpected impulse, swift and undeniable, seized Eleanor. It wasn't a planned test, not a calculated scheme. It was a sudden, almost playful opportunity that life in its strange, meandering way had presented. A chance to see Clara, truly see her, before the roles of potential daughter-in-law and mother were formally put on. A chance to see her interact without the pressure of making a good impression on Thomas's mother. What would she do? How would she behave when faced with someone she perceived as a humble hospital helper? Eleanor closed the book and placed it gently on Mrs. Gable's lap. She stood up, offering a small, neutral smile, as Clara, having spotted them, approached. Clara reached their corner, her expression polite and slightly hesitant. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice pleasant and clear. "Could you perhaps tell me where I might find Mrs. Eleanor Hayes? I believe she's a patient on this floor. My name is Clara." She addressed Eleanor with a natural deference, the kind one might show to someone busy helping others. There was no hint of superiority, no impatience, just simple courtesy. Eleanor's impulse solidified. This was it. "Ah, Mrs. Hayes," she said, keeping her voice even, her eyes twinkling just slightly. She adopted a slightly more formal tone, one she hadn't used much since retirement. "She stepped out for a moment, dear. Just down the hall, perhaps. Taking a little walk for her constitution. She should be back shortly." Eleanor used her middle name, the one few people knew her by. "I'm Mary," she added, extending a hand slightly. "I help out here sometimes, you know. Read to the patients." Clara's face relaxed slightly. She smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached her eyes. "Oh, it's lovely to meet you, Mary. I'm Clara. I'm here to visit her. Thomas is my partner." She shook Eleanor's hand warmly, her grip firm and genuine. "Thank you. I'll just wait here then, if that's all right. Thomas is running a bit late." "Of course, dear," Eleanor said, gesturing to an empty chair a little way off. "Make yourself comfortable. Perhaps I can get you a cup of tea while you wait? We have a kettle here." "Oh, no, thank you, Mary." "That's very kind," Clara replied. "I'm perfectly fine. Please carry on with your reading. Don't let me interrupt." She sat down, placing her stylish bag neatly beside the chair. Eleanor sat back down beside Mrs. Gable, picking up the book again. She didn't read immediately, though. She watched Clara. Clara didn't immediately pull out a phone or seem restless. Instead, she quietly observed the room, her expression thoughtful, taking in the scene around her. A few minutes passed in quiet waiting. Then the young woman near the door with the worried eyes suddenly burst into quiet tears, struggling to control her sobs. She fumbled in her bag, evidently unable to find a tissue. Clara, without a moment's hesitation, stood up. "Are you all right?" Clara asked gently, approaching the distressed woman. Her voice was soft, full of genuine concern. "Here, please. Take these." She offered a small pack of tissues from her own elegant bag. "It's so difficult waiting. Is there anything I can do?" The woman sniffled, taking the tissues gratefully. "Oh, thank you so much. It's my mother. She's having a procedure, and I'm so worried. I just couldn't find my tissues." "It's perfectly understandable to be worried," Clara said softly, pulling up a chair beside her. "Hospitals are worrying places, but the doctors and nurses here are wonderful. Try to breathe deeply. Just being here for her is the most important thing." She stayed with the woman for a few minutes, talking quietly, offering calm reassurance, a steady, kind presence. Eleanor watched, her heart warming. There was no fanfare, no show of exaggerated sympathy, just quiet, genuine kindness offered without a second thought. Clara returned to her seat. She didn't boast about helping or even glance at Eleanor to see if she had noticed. She simply settled back to wait. A few minutes later, a busy nurse bustled through the common room, juggling charts and medications, when she stumbled slightly, sending a small stack of patient forms tumbling to the floor. Clara was instantly on her feet again, moving swiftly and gracefully. "Oh, let me help you with that," she said cheerfully, bending down to gather the scattered papers. She worked quickly and efficiently, sorting them neatly before handing them back to the grateful nurse. "There you go. Looks like a busy morning." "Tell me about it," the nurse laughed, adjusting the stack. "Thank you so much, dear. You're a lifesaver." She hurried off, already distracted by her duties. Clara smiled after her. Then her gaze fell back on Mrs. Gable, who was struggling again with her book, her brow furrowed in frustration. Instead of just sitting and waiting, Clara walked over, a gentle smile on her face. "Hello again, Mrs. Gable," Clara said with a warm smile. "Are you enjoying your reading? Mary was just reading to you, wasn't she? Would you like me to read for a little while? My grandmother loved this collection of poems. They always calmed her." Mrs. Gable brightened immediately. "Oh, would you, dear? That would be ever so kind. These letters are just being dreadfully stubborn today." Clara sat down, picking up the book. She didn't read in Eleanor's measured, trained librarian's voice. Her voice was softer, perhaps a little less resonant, but filled with such gentle patience and clear affection. She held the book correctly, at a comfortable distance, and read with feeling, pausing occasionally to make a small, kind comment to Mrs. Gable about the poem, or simply to give her hand a gentle squeeze. It was a quiet, intimate scene of simple human connection. Eleanor sat watching them, a profound sense of peace and deep gratitude settling over her. This wasn't the formal, perhaps slightly intimidating meeting she had anticipated. There was no stilted conversation, no awkward silences to fill, no performance. Instead, she was witnessing Clara in her natural element, simply being kind, observant, and willing to help wherever it was needed, without being asked, without knowing she was being observed by the most important person, without seeking recognition or praise. She was just being, and what she was truly good. The quiet dignity with which she offered comfort, the cheerful willingness to help with a mundane task, the tender patience shown to an elderly stranger, It was a truer measure of character than any polished resume or elegant appearance could ever convey. Clara read for nearly 20 minutes, her voice a calm murmur. Mrs. Gable had leaned her head back, her eyes closed, a serene smile on her face, occasionally humming softly along with the rhythm of the verse. Clara finished the poem, closed the book gently, and just sat quietly for a moment, holding Mrs. Gable's hand, a small, comforting presence. It was a small gesture, easily missed in the busyness of the world, but Eleanor saw it. A simple, human connection offered without expectation, purely out of the goodness of her heart. Just as Clara was about to speak to Mrs. Gable again, the common room doors opened once more, and Thomas hurried in. He looked harried, but his face softened with relief when he saw his mother. "Mother, I'm so sorry I'm late. The meeting ran over." He started, his eyes scanning the room before landing on the corner where Eleanor and Clara sat together, Clara holding Mrs. Gable's hand. His face broke into a wide, relieved smile. "Ah, you found her. Clara, you're here. Mother, this is—" Thomas stopped mid-sentence, a puzzled look crossing his face. He saw his mother, dressed simply, sitting beside Clara. He saw the comfortable ease between them, but also the context. His mother, Eleanor Hayes, a woman of quiet dignity and careful routine, sitting in the common room, dressed in simple clothes, and Clara, his sophisticated girlfriend, holding the hand of old Mrs. Gable, a well-known long-term patient. It wasn't the scene he'd pictured. "Mother?" Thomas said again, walking towards them, his brow furrowed slightly in confusion. Clara looked up, smiling warmly at Thomas. "Oh, Thomas, you're here. I've been waiting for Mrs. Hayes. Mary here," she gestured to Eleanor with genuine affection, "has been keeping me company and reading to Mrs. Gable. She's been so kind." Thomas reached them, his brow furrowed slightly in confusion. He looked at Eleanor, then at Clara, then back at Eleanor. "Mary?" he repeated, his voice questioning. He turned to Eleanor. "Mother, are you all right? Did, did something happen? Why are you—" He trailed off, unsure how to voice his confusion about her appearance and the situation. Eleanor smiled, a slow, warm smile that reached her eyes, banishing the last vestiges of the mischievous impulse. She stood up fully this time, turning to Clara, taking her hand. "Clara, dear," she said, her voice softening, losing the slight formality she'd adopted as Mary. "I must confess something. Thomas looks rather confused, and it's entirely my doing." She squeezed Clara's hand gently. "When you arrived, you asked for Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, and seeing me here, like this," she gestured to her simple clothes, "perhaps you didn't recognize me from photographs, or maybe you thought I was a volunteer, or another patient's visitor. And well, an old librarian can sometimes be a little mischievous, you know. I introduced myself as Mary. But Thomas is right, I am Eleanor Hayes." Clara's eyes widened, a look of absolute surprise crossing her face. She glanced from Eleanor to Thomas, who was now staring at his mother in utter astonishment, then back to Eleanor. You're Mrs. Hayes, Thomas's mother." She looked at Eleanor's simple clothes, her understated appearance, so different from the elegant woman in the photographs Thomas had shown her over the years, the woman she had been nervous about impressing. The reality was so different from the expectation. Eleanor nodded, her smile unwavering, her heart full. "I am, and I must apologize for my little deception. It was an impulse, you see, a sudden thought. But it gave me a precious opportunity, an opportunity to see you, Clara, simply being yourself, without the pressure of meeting Thomas's mother, without needing to impress me." Her voice grew earnest, her gaze holding Clara's. "And in the short time you thought I was just Mary, you showed me such genuine kindness. You helped a stranger find tissues, you offered assistance to a busy nurse without being asked, and you sat and read to sweet Mrs. Gable with such tender patience. You didn't know I was watching, or that I was anyone important, but you simply extended warmth and compassion because it was needed. I saw your heart, Clara, and it is beautiful." Clara's surprise slowly melted into a blush, followed by a wide, radiant smile that banished any lingering awkwardness. "Oh, Mrs. Hayes, Eleanor, I had no idea." She laughed, a clear, lovely sound, shaking her head in disbelief. I just saw people who needed a little help, or maybe someone to listen. It felt natural. Thomas, who had been watching this exchange with growing understanding and a happy, relieved smile, stepped forward, putting an arm around Eleanor, then reaching out to Clara. Mother, you sly, wonderful thing. He pulled them both gently towards him. And Clara, my wonderful Clara, I knew you were like this, but it makes me so incredibly happy that you got to see it for yourself, Mother. She truly is everything I told you and more. The formal barrier Eleanor had worried about dissolved completely in that moment. Clara hadn't needed to perform, hadn't needed to try to impress. She had simply been herself, in a moment of everyday human interaction, and that self had shone brighter than any curated image or planned conversation ever could. The quiet acts of compassion in a mundane setting spoke louder than any words. Please call me Eleanor, dear, Eleanor said, her voice warm with affection, squeezing Clara's hand again. And thank you. Thank you for being exactly who you are. It's the most wonderful welcome you could have given me. Clara's eyes sparkled, still surprised, but now filled with warmth and ease. And thank you, Eleanor, for letting me see you too. Not the image, but you, reading to Mrs. Gable, being Mary. It makes meeting you feel like meeting a friend, a wonderful friend. The rest of the visit was easy, comfortable, and filled with warmth. They settled into chairs in Eleanor's room, a cozy circle of three. Thomas sat between them, his hands finding one of theirs at different times, radiating contentment. They talked, not about business or impressing anyone, but about simple things, the quiet life Eleanor enjoyed, Clara's love for reading and gardening, Thomas's latest project. Clara listened attentively when Eleanor spoke, asked thoughtful questions about her recovery, and shared stories of her own life and her work with an open heart. There was a natural flow between them, a sense of rightness that Eleanor hadn't felt so strongly in a long time. As the afternoon drew to a close, and Thomas announced it was time for Clara to catch her train back to the city. She'd come specifically to meet Eleanor before heading to a weekend workshop. Eleanor held Clara's hand once more. This was not the meeting I expected, Clara, Eleanor said, smiling up at her. It was so much better. Clara leaned down and gently hugged Eleanor, a genuine warm embrace. Me too, Eleanor. Much better. After they left, the hospital room settled back into its quiet hum. Eleanor sat by the window, watching the robin on the lawn. Her heart felt lighter than it had in months. She had worried, as mothers do, about her son's happiness, about the person he would choose to share his life with. She had expected to scrutinize, to perhaps feel a little protective reserve, but instead she had seen genuine goodness bloom in an ordinary moment, witnessed through a simple, unintended disguise. She had seen Clara's true heart, and it was even more beautiful than she could have hoped. She hadn't just met Clara, Thomas's girlfriend. She had met the quiet strength, the inherent kindness, and the beautiful soul of the woman who loved her son. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that Thomas had chosen wisely. Her son was not just getting a partner, he was gaining a true companion, a kind and compassionate soul. And Eleanor, she suspected, was gaining a daughter of the heart. The sharp scent of the hospital no longer felt so strong. It was overlaid now with the sweet, lingering scent of kindness, warmth, and the quiet joy of a mother whose deepest wish had been fulfilled in the most unexpected way. And that, Eleanor knew, was the most healing fragrance of all. She didn't know I was his mother. Then this happened.